My father only hit me one time, open palm across my jaw when I was 7. Once in my life. It's been 40 years, but I can still feel it. The sound of the slap, the sting, the shock. I'm sitting right now where it happened, at the window, halfway up the stairs of my childhood home. Remember the look on his face as he struck me. For years I thought that expression was anger. I was about as wrong as you could get. I'm alone in the house, sat here on the steps, drink in hand. Through the dirty old glass I could see the night falling, creeping over the fields, bringing the stars and the cold. The quiet here reminds me of being a boy. My brother's not long gone. He had a lot to say tonight, which ain't like him. Left me with a lot to think about. Unexpected truth could do that. So here I am, looking through my memories with fresh eyes. Every family's got a strange habit or two they think is normal, all thinking nothing of it until they grow up and realize it was out of the ordinary. For us, my sisters and brother and I, it was the rain. Whenever it came down, we all had to get inside and sit in the living room together. Every time, no exceptions. My mom and the 4 kids. My father locked all the doors, not a word spoken, and then stood at the kitchen window staring out, always watching the same spot too, a fenced-off field in the north, maybe 500 yards from the house. Most of the time, a few minutes would pass. He would sigh and say, "All right." Then we could all go back about our business as if nothing had happened. Sometimes, though, once or twice a year, if I'm remembering right, he would pull the shutter down, double-check all the doors were locked, and then would come sit with us in silence till the rain went off. We all talked and played, but he never said a word, just listened. I think I was 4, maybe 5 years old when I realized not every family does this. We were all out in town when it got to raining, and everyone just continued as if nothing had happened. I remember how confused I was, waiting at the doors to the nearest shop in a near panic. My mother, leaning down to whisper so no one would hear, said, "That's only for it all money, okay?" We lived on what had once been a farm, one of the biggest in the county. My grandparents on my father's side had owned it since they married. No one could find out who they bought it from. The land was, still is, incredibly fertile. It's how my family made its money, 50 years of selling livestock and produce at a rate you wouldn't believe. My father left home when he was 16, just like his 3 brothers. He had college paid for and plenty of money to get him started in life. But, as he told me many times, a head start don't guarantee a win. He met my mother, fell in love, dropped out of school, and whittled away his life savings trying to figure out what he wanted to do with his life. When it came time, and my grandparents had passed, my mother and father were broke and out of work. They had been left the land in the will. In truth, it wasn't much of a farm anymore. My grandparents had tired of the work, and when they didn't need the money, they let the land go wild. I knew my father hadn't wanted to move back. He muttered it again and again under his breath enough times. It had always seemed crazy to me, but in the end, they didn't have a choice. It was in the will that the house and land wasn't to be sold, not in any circumstance. So my parents moved in. They had been desperate for children for years, especially my mother, without any luck. Then within a month of moving to the farm, she fell pregnant with my brother John, and that was that. They took to looking after the land, making a living off selling the fruit and vegetables that were still growing there. Then, a new child every year. I was the last. John, Susie, Sylvia, and me, Austin. It was late November, a few days before my 8th birthday when it happened. A storm had come in overnight from the east, clouds so thick the sky was still black as night before sunrise. That rain coming down was so loud you could hardly hear yourself speak. Wind felt like it was moving the house. My father had pulled down the shutters and come sit with all of us, looking as tired as I had ever seen him. I remember it was awful warm in the house. I was sitting on my mother's lap, and we'd both dozed off. My brother was drawing with that colorful pencil set he loves, and the girls were playing some board game I'd forgotten the name of. I woke because I needed to go to the toilet. I slipped down off my mother's knee and saw my father had also fallen asleep. First and only time it happened. I didn't want to wake them. I knew I was wrong, that I shouldn't leave the room on my own, but I don't know. Why do little children do the things they do? I crept out. No one even raised their heads. I felt it when I reached the stairs. I've tried to describe it before, but I can't find the words. Something cold and heavy, pulling at me from out the rain. It seemed to flood in through the window, an invisible wave, reaching, searching, calling, just for me. I walked to the window. In the memory, the world seems very far away, like I was walking in a dream. I looked out through the glass, through the sheets of rain, across the dark fields. There was something out there, in the shadows of the clouds. It saw me. Then my father hit me. I didn't wake for almost a day. My mom was holding my hand. Clear from her face, she'd been crying. It wasn't like waking from a regular sleep. I remember that. Everything seemed darker somehow. Things held in my hand still felt far away. Voices came to me as if through water. Hard to explain. My father apologized, sat down with just the two of us, and said he was sorry for hitting me, but he had no choice. I was never to do that again. I had to understand, to swear to him. When it rained in those fields, I wasn't to leave the living room. I promised. For weeks after, I would wake in the night, shaking, screaming. When my sisters asked me what I dreamt of, I could never tell them. In all honesty, I didn't know. All that was left was that call, that pulling inside, and that feeling of being watched. My brother took a turn to sit with me one night. I remember him asking me, "Why'd you do it, Austin?" "Well, I had to pee, John." "No, not that. The window. Why were you opening the window?" The next year was when we lost my mother. My sisters and I were away north, spending the week with our Aunt Amelia and her kids. My brother had stayed with our parents to work the farm. Neither him nor my father would ever talk about what happened. Not clearly, anyhow. There had been a terrible storm, lasting from dawn till dusk. They had all been sitting together, waiting it out when the wind picked up worse than ever. That old oak next to the house finally came down, caught the living room window with it. The rain washed in, washed across my mother, he said, and she vanished. I sat in that room for hours when we got home, just staring at the broken window, the watermarks that left on the floor, the rotten oak laying down. I never saw my mother again after that. Those few months after were the worst of my life. The aftermath of it all, the police forever at the house questioning all of us, my father drinking, seemed like more and more every day, my sisters crying, my brothers becoming quiet and distant. I didn't handle it well, of course, not any of it. I had this memory of her, sitting with me, stuck in a loop in my head. We would have conversations in my imagination. I would daydream into them over and over. Then I would snap awake back to the reality around me and realize she was gone. I started waking in the night crying again. But now no one came to sit with me. They had their own nightmares. About 6 months had passed. I was out working on the fences with my father, right at the edge of our property. It was a beautiful day, a little too hot if anything, barely a breeze. We'd been out for hours when he stood up sharp and turned to the horizon. "Austin, get in the car now." It was the first words he had spoken all day. I recognized that look on his face, the tone in his voice. Weather was turning. To this day I haven't seen anything like it. A freak event, once in a lifetime for a storm to move that fast. The wind first, cold and sudden. You hear the thunder, distant, but closing, and the sky starts to darken. My father was driving too fast, especially over the dirt roads we had out there. I could hear him, muttering under his breath as he drove. "They'll know not to leave the house. Even if I'm not there, your sisters and brothers will know." We hammered over boulders and across ditches, old car shaking so much I near fell out of the seat. I remember seeing a drop of rain on the windscreen. "You've got better eyesight than me, boy," he said. "I still on the road. The field to the north of the house. You know the one. What do you see?" I stared out where he asked. "Nothing, but what?" "Someone's opened the gate." He slammed on the brakes. I felt the car fishtail, seatbelt cut into my neck and choked the breath out of me. My father had gone deathly white. He pulled off his coat and threw it over my head, plunging me into darkness. "Get down, don't move." He pressed it over me, pushing me down into the seat. There was a tremor in his voice I'd never heard before. "Don't look, Austin. No matter what you hear, boy, don't look, and don't make a sound." His hand was so tight on the back of my neck it hurt even through the jacket. I could hear the rain now, on the roof and the glass. The wind shook the car. Then I felt it. That weight, that cold pull from out in the storm. Something started to scrape slow down the side of the car. Something sharp. That sound. My father shifted position, pulled something from the back seat, and I heard a snap I recognized. He had reached for the shotgun, checked if it was loaded. The sound drew closer, louder, at the back door now. The howl of the metal, through the rain and the wind coming towards us. It stopped, right by my door. No sound but the rain and our breathing. Tap, tap, tap. On the glass just inches from me, I heard my father cock the shotgun. Tap, tap, tap. He took his hand from my back and shifted, I guess to get a better hold on the barrel. Tap, tap. A lighter scratching on the grass, something sliding down, then the rattle of the handle. I was soaked in an icy sweat, unable to move, barely able to breathe. Then it stopped. The rain faded out in a few seconds, even faster than it had come in. I could hear my father crying. He died a few years later. John and Susie had gone off to college. Just me and Sylvie left. Dad had been drinking heavier, hell of a lot heavier. Took to reading my mother's diary, listening to old music. Couldn't talk to him about it. Christ almighty, we tried. It was raining heavy one morning. My sister and I were in the living room and we'd both fallen asleep to the sound. He just got up, walked out into the rain with his shotgun. The sound of it firing woke us. Heard him shout, fire again. I'll never forget my sister's face, eyes so wide as we stared at each other from across the living room. The rain had stopped by the time we got to the door. There was nothing there but that weapon lying in the wet grass. Dad was gone too. So here I am, decades later. Feels strange to even say that, you know. How can it be so long? My brother called me here this morning, told me the story again from his side. The truth of it, or as much as he got from Dad, I guess. The family's always known about what came with the rain. They never gave it a name, never talked about the details of what they saw. Came with the land, like a deal you signed up for by living here. Who knows when it began, what it really was. Sometimes it came, sometimes it didn't. Used to be worth it for how fertile the land was, but not something you could live with forever. When the kids got old enough, they were told the truth, made to swear to never sell the land, and to stick to the deal. Through tears he told me about seeing our mother taken. Window smashed, rain washed in across her and she was gone, he said. It took her, Austin. John says he's leaving the country. Can't take the weight of this place anymore. I don't blame him. Can't say I don't understand. He left it all to me, to do with as I please. My sisters aren't interested. Don't even live in the country no more. Not how I expected my day to end, tell you that much. Here I am, leaning against the cold glass. Too much to drink, too much to think about. Ain't a good mix, you know. I'm remembering my mother, snatched away from us like smoke in the wind. Remembering that open gate, blurred by rain. That tapping on the glass of the window car. Decades later, I can still feel it. Watching me. I gotta wink my way to the living room. There's a storm coming.